Hello to my Sunrise family. Happy to be coming to you from Central Command of Better Beings here in beautiful City Park, Denver, Colorado. Um, as much as I would rather be with you in your conference room, I am very happy that I'm going to get to at least talk to you, and hopefully you're chatting back at me as you are listening to this recording. But going over some content here on how to nourish your noggin, give you some tools for a healthy head. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with me, but if you are not, welcome. My name is Michelle Zellner. I have a business called Better Beings, and that really is my mission to help people be better human beings. I have my undergraduate degrees in psychology and nutrition from the University of Hawaii and my master's in kinesiology from CU Boulder, and have been doing something in the wellness space for about 24 years now. So we're going to cover a lot of content today, and I will tie all of it together with how this really does relate to our mental well-being. But I absolutely believe that the mind and body are connected. So it's interesting to me that we even call it a mind-body connection, because your mind is part of your body. But that seems to be the catchphrase. So if you are not yet on board with this idea that it's connected, I hope by the end of it, I have brought you over to the other side. I know just in my own journey of my wellness and enhancing my well-being, really getting stuff figured out in here was a huge piece of the puzzle to help me move forward in my own physical journey of well-being as well. And it really goes down to the thoughts that come in, right? The thoughts will come in and generally will generate some kind of feeling, and that feeling will create a type of action, and that that feeling will create an energy, and that energy is going to lead to some kind of action. And when negativity comes in, it's almost always negativity going out. And while nobody controls the thoughts that come in, we all do have the ability to control what we do with those thoughts. So, really getting to the root of all of this, it just goes back to our survival mechanism. Back in the day, we had to literally do things just to survive. And the only reason we're here today is because we have that fight or flight mechanism in place. So, the thing that comes in the mind is going to make the body do a certain thing. It's going to make it behave in a certain way. So whether you have a physical ailment that is causing you to feel a certain way in your mind and have a type of mental outlook, or you maybe have some mental health challenges that are then going to determine what you do or don't do in terms of things necessary to take care of your physical health. They're always intertwined. You cannot separate them. And the daily choices that we make are either going to promote a healthy, high-functioning human, or are perhaps going to prevent us from being healthy, high-functioning humans. So let me dig deep now into each of the elements of how to nourish your noggin. And certainly this is a big piece of it. I mean, they're all big pieces. That's the thing. There really is not one that is more important than the other, because they're all necessary for high functioning. Some people might already be doing really well in certain areas, so there are going to be some that are certainly more relevant to you than maybe another area. But definitely getting a handle on our stressors. When I talk about stress management, I like to kind of separate it into two categories. We should do what we can to reduce our stressors. And when I say reduce stress, I mean minimize how often we kick into fight or flight. And then we need to have practices in place to help us recover and heal from the fight or flight response. So let's talk first about reducing the exposure to fight or flight, right? That really is any time we react that is tied to the fight or flight response. So something that makes me angry or irritated or frustrated, annoyed, I'm in woulda, coulda, shoulda mode, or in worry, worry, worry mode. These are all things that back in the day were responsible for us surviving. If I had an animal that was trying to eat me, I had to engage rapidly. There was no option to stand around and think about that, because if I did, I would have been eaten. So it's don't think, just do, right? It's react. I had to probably make sure I remembered the horrible experience of getting really, really sick when I ate these berries, so that the next time I'm out and I see these berries, I'm afraid of them and I don't eat them, because if I do, I might get sick and die this time. Right? So fight or flight is totally natural in us. It just at this point in most of our lives is not necessary, but we are programmed for that reaction. So the first thing would be to identify your triggers. What are the particular people, places, scenarios, situations that get you going, right? So you have to identify, what are they? Put real words to them. And once you can step back and determine that none of these are threats to your life, then we have to teach ourselves to respond in a different way, to not allow fight or flight to kick in. Why is this so important? Well, when fight or flight kicks in, we release cortisol. Cortisol is the hormone that's going to tell all your other hormones what to do based on the nature of the threat. So your hormones are just part of your chemical messaging system that tells your body what to do. So literally everything in your life is ruled by your hormones, your neurotransmitters, the chemicals in your body that dictate systems how to function. So in fight or flight, it's very obvious and clear and necessary for us to be in a state of hormonal imbalance, because certain systems need to ramp up depending on whatever the threat is, and other systems aren't necessary. And so we fight, we flee, we defend, we live or we die. That was the choice. And assuming we lived, we then reset. Well, nowadays, if we're in constant fight or flight because we constantly let our triggers get us going, we never reset. We stay in that state of chronic chemical imbalance, which is why we see a whole bunch of physical, mental, and emotional health issues that arise out of chronic stress. So how is this related to nourishing your noggin? Well, if we minimize fight or flight in the first place, we minimize the chemical disruption, the chemical imbalance that's going to happen. Also, when we're in that state of chronic fight or flight and we're constantly releasing cortisol, a constant presence of cortisol literally destroys you on every level. So every hormone in your body is great, it's necessary, but it should only be released when it's supposed to be released, and not when it's really not necessary. But certainly we need it when we need it, right? Well, one of the things that cortisol does, a constant presence of it, is it actually damages your synapses. So your synapses are just the bridges that connect your dendrites, which are the pathways that come off of your neurons. This is how messages transmit. Well, if I have no synapses, I have no bridge, I can't get my message across. So literally it damages the actual organ of your brain, right? The actual makeup of your brain. So it's not just mental and emotional health, but your brain, your noggin, is an organ, and it has to have all of its components there and hopefully functioning at optimal capacity for us to continue to be healthy humans. So minimizing exposure to fight or flight, and then of course putting tools in place to help us redirect our thoughts, redirect our focus, calm us down when we find the anxiety kicking in. So something like a positive mantra, deep breathing, gratitude, meditation, imagery, guided imagery, visualization, therapy, journaling. I mean, I could go on and on and on, because there are so many tools. You just have to use them. And I think it's important to have a very full toolkit, because every trigger might require a slightly different tool to deal with that trigger. So first is to minimize fight or flight. And then second is to have plenty of tools in place, not only to teach you how to respond in a different way to your trigger, but also the practices that are going to be part of a lifestyle that are going to help recondition the brain and rewire out of this natural inclination to kick into fight or flight. So having lots of these things in place, and then of course things like a physical outlet, right? That's a great way to manage stress. Exercise helps reverse a lot of the consequences that chronic stress could do for you. But another really awesome component of exercise, I'm going to save for when I get to the physical movement piece. All right, nutrition. Nourish your noggin with proper nutrition. Ready? I'm going to first talk about the brain as the organ and the things that you need to put in your body to literally feed your brain. So I don't know what you see when you look at this picture. I see a whole bunch of really intense, vibrant color. I see foods that have fat. I see foods that have protein. I see foods that have fiber. I see lots of variety in my sources of foods that have fat and protein and fiber. That is key. The other thing I see here is real food, right? I mean, I know exactly where every one of those things come from. It doesn't really take me a lot to figure out. So how do we properly nourish ourselves? Well, eat real food. That is number one. Food in as close to its natural state as possible. So if in theory you can go outside and pick it off a tree, dig it out of the ground, it's roaming in the pasture or swimming in the water or comes from an animal that does one of those things, it's real. It will provide your body nutrients that it can use. And I think this is a really big point that sometimes gets overlooked. The food we put in our body is not just about calories. It's about the actual nutrients that these foods are giving us. So the foods that we eat that give us protein, the reason we need that is for the amino acids that that food is made up of. The foods that give us fat is for the fatty acids that those foods are made up of. The foods that give us carbohydrate, ideally, should be for the antioxidants, the phytochemicals, the bioflavonoids, the different types of fiber that those foods give us. These are all critical nutritional components that the body needs in order to form a whole bunch of chemical components in order to carry out a whole bunch of functions. Of course, we want to eat in a certain way. So I know many of you know this. PFF is your BFF. So every time you eat, there should be protein, fat, and fiber, because we need to provide our bodies and our brains a nice, steady source of fuel. So we want to have nice, slow in and slow out, not these crazy spikes and crashes of blood sugar. I don't know if you've ever been low blood sugar, but if you have, how does that affect your brain function? Well, you might not be able to think or concentrate, or you find that you're making mistakes, or you can't formulate a sentence. Perhaps emotionally you don't feel great, right? You're a little crabby, you're a little irritated, maybe you get sleepy. Well, this is because we have no fuel going to the brain. So the way you eat is as important as what you eat. So PFF every 2 to 4 hours, keeping that nice, slow, steady supply of fuel so that we remain alert and energized, and we're feeding our brains what it needs. Let me talk about fat for a moment, because I think fat is still a little bit feared. People are still afraid of fat. So I hope that many of you have embraced it. If not, keep in mind that your brain is very largely made up of fat. And your neurological pathways need a coating of fat to protect it. Your neurological pathways are just like your wiring system. So if you've ever seen electrical wires, you've probably seen the rubber coating that goes around the electrical wires. Well, that's what fat does around your nerves. So I think about the generation probably after mine that literally grew up without fat because we were taught that fat is the devil. You're going to get fat and you're going to have a heart attack and you're going to die. And so we didn't eat any fat. So instead we ate a whole bunch of sugar because that's what happens. But these little humans who are living and growing up without fat, their developing brains do not have what it needs to develop properly. So obviously the source of fat matters, which is why I'm going to say again, eat real food. So, the things that are going to come from our plants, our seeds, our nuts, our avocados, our coconut oil, from animals, I think is fine too. So whether it's from dairy or, four-legged animal or a fish or whatever, these are going to provide really essential nutrients for the body to function correctly. On the flip side, if we're not putting high quality fuel in our body, we're probably putting low quality fuel in our body. And while those things taste delicious and they're convenient and they're entertaining, they probably aren't really beneficial from a physiological standpoint. Now, in the moment, they might nourish us emotionally, so I do think that's important. But am I doing that at the expense of my physical functioning and at the long-term functioning of my mental and emotional well-being? I know I did. I chose pleasure foods because I love it and it's fun and I'll worry about it later. And then eventually it gets up in here like, ugh, why did I do that? I can't believe I ate all that. I wasn't going to eat that. Oh, you're such a loser, right? I mean, eventually it makes me feel not so great. But also from, again, the physiological standpoint, when we feed our bodies poison, now it's got to work hard to get rid of it. And specifically those things that are going to cause inflammation, like sugar and alcohol and a whole bunch of other things that, probably are maybe even good quality sources of nutrition, but perhaps the body doesn't love it entirely. So I would say, again, going back to real food, if you nourish your body properly, it will probably minimize your desire for those other things. We do still have to address the psychological need or want for those things. And context is so incredibly important, right? It's very different when I enjoy some ice cream because I like ice cream versus I've had a hard day, I deserve it, I need to treat myself, I'm going to go eat ice cream. Or I enjoy a glass of wine with my girlfriends versus I got to have my wine to wind down from my really stressful day. So the context that we use things, I think, is really important. If I'm turning to something, and it doesn't even have to be, nutrition or anything I'm putting in my body, maybe it's retail therapy, maybe it's gaming, gambling, it could be anything. But if I'm using that as a distraction for actually dealing with a way that I'm feeling, well, that's probably not going to work out in the long run, right? So I think getting to the root of the emotions that we are feeling is critical. And then looking for alternative things to do other than distracting ourselves from it or trying to just literally mask it, push it down, alter it, right? I mean, things like drugs and alcohol, they literally alter your brain chemistry so that you feel a very different way from how you felt before you took it. That's why we do it. So clearly what we put in our bodies is going to have a huge impact on the physical functioning of the brain as well as the mental and emotional component. And if we consistently put really great high quality fuel in, we will provide our bodies and brains with what it needs to function correctly. And when you do that, it really does improve your chances of minimizing some of those other choices. Alrighty, let us get to the physical activity component here, how to nourish your noggin through movement. I really think movement is medicine. You just need to do it every day as a lifestyle and probably do a bunch of different types because it really does impact our brains in a lot of different ways. So how does this affect the organ, the brain as an organ? When you exercise, specifically cardio exercise, and you elevate heart rate, you are increasing circulation to the brain. Of course, our blood is carrying our oxygen and nutrition. The only way to get additional oxygen and nutrition to your brain is to get additional blood to your brain. We're going upstream from the heart, right? So we have to elevate heart rate. You're not going to get additional blood to the brain without elevating your heart rate. So we've got to do that. We've got to get our circulation going and increase heart rate, nourish the brain that way. When you do that, when you exercise and you increase heart rate, it stimulates the production of BDNF. This is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, sometimes called fertilizer for the brain. So again, to just go over like what is happening in your brain, right? The neurological pathways. So imagine that this is your neuron. This is the messaging centers. These are your dendrites. These are the roadways that messages travel down. And then we have the synapses that are going to connect path to path, neuron to neuron, dendrite to dendrite. When you exercise and you increase the production of BDNF helps you grow more dendrites per neuron, and it makes them longer. So you can probably imagine if I have long dendrites, that means I only need really, really, really tiny bridges. It's a lot easier to get a message over a little bridge than it is over a big bridge. The more pathways I have, the more options, all the stimulus that's coming into my brain to travel down. So the person who has more neurological pathways literally has a much calmer mind because it's not this crazy jam of stimulus that I can only go in 5 directions. Maybe I have 20 directions it can go. So you are literally increasing the capacity of your brain function when you exercise regularly. It also helps to grow your hippocampus, which is where we store memories. So, you know, if you want to be in your golden years, like these lovely people up on the screen, and be remembering things, it's nice to have a nice big hippocampus. So exercise will help with that. It also triggers the release of our feel-good chemicals, serotonin and dopamine. So again, some of those brain chemicals whose literal job is to make you feel good. What else? From the emotional standpoint, I have yet to meet somebody who hangs their head in shame because they've worked out. Right? I mean, generally when you exercise, you're like, good job me, look at me, I did something good for me. When you are stronger, you tend to have more confidence. And so from that standpoint, you generally present with a little more confidence, head up, shoulders back, right? You feel pretty good about that. If you do things that maybe require coordination, or you do things that you've not done before, so you have to learn something new, now I'm activating a part of my brain that has not been activated. So let's say I'm going to start practicing my balance and standing on one foot. Well, in most people's lives, we stand on 2 feet on solid ground. Our big muscles do all the work to accomplish that. Our little stabilizer muscles in our feet, they don't need to do anything. So they literally have no idea that they have a job to do. But now I'm going to challenge myself and start standing on 1 foot. So there's a part in my brain that has to send messages to those muscles to tell them to engage, right? That's when all the wobbling first goes on. If you've ever been on a Bosu ball, the first time you stand on it, there's like all this shaky, shaky, shaking going on. That is your brain sending messages to those muscles to do something. And they're like, wait, what? Oh, and then they know what to do. So I've activated a part of my brain to send messages to parts of my body that otherwise wouldn't get activated. If I'm maybe doing a dance class or something that requires choreography, something that requires me to have judgment or reaction time, like boxing or kayaking or rock climbing, right? I have to think. Where am I putting my hand, right? I have to strategize when I'm kayaking. I have to know what's happening when I'm boxing so that I protect myself. These are all ways that our brain is now stimulated in various fashions that they otherwise would not be. Of course, exercise is also a great release of energy, and we are energetic beings. If we don't release the energy, it's going to do something inside, none of which is good. So, movement is medicine. We have to do it pretty much every day as a lifestyle. Lots of variety would be great. So you just have to determine, are you willing to commit and enjoy all the benefits of it? And then of course we have to figure out how to make that happen, right? But clearly it has tremendous benefit from your brain from an actual functioning perspective, as well as from a mental and an emotional perspective as well. Sleep, it does a body and a brain really good. I think sleep is making a comeback. It's kind of becoming trendy now. It used to be really trendy, like a badge of honor to say, oh, I hardly sleep. I don't need any sleep. And look at me, I'm so productive. We know that sleep is a necessity. It is not a luxury. And we just have to figure out how to position ourselves to get the best quality sleep possible. From a brain functioning perspective, when we sleep, that actually gives parts of your brain the opportunity to rest because they've been very, very busy during the day trying to filter through all the stimulus and figure out what to do. So that gets to rest, and other parts of your brain get to work. So specifically, when we go through our deep stage 3, our restorative sleep, we're seeing brainwave patterns come very, very slow. When we ramp up into our REM stage, rapid eye movement, those brainwave patterns elevate to a similar rate as to when we are awake. We know that there is a lot of organization of thoughts and cataloging memories in your REM stage. So I think sometimes we really do just think of sleep as, you know, the need to have it so that we're not tired the next day, which is great. I mean, think about the emotional and the mental health benefits of sleep. I mean, are you crabby? Do you have kids who are crabby when they didn't have their nap? Are you crabby or irritable or have a short temper when you didn't get good sleep? Probably, right? And then we're literally sleepy, so we can't think quickly, we can't have really great judgment. Our vision is impaired, our reaction time is impaired. I mean, all of these things. And then again, from that long-term perspective, if we are consistently sleep deprived, that means we are consistently denying our brain the time it needs to do the work that it needs to do. So how do we get good sleep? Well, it starts in the morning, because everything you do throughout the day is either going to help you sleep or potentially prevent you from sleeping. Back in the day, we were on a day-night schedule, right? We hunted and gathered and exerted physical energy during the day. And at night, danger comes out. We hide for protection. We get really quiet so danger doesn't know we're there. That allowed our brain to release the chemicals necessary to send us the signal that we're sleepy. There was no reason to ignore it. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot to do. And so I went to sleep. And my brain and body got to do all its hard work during my various stages of the sleep cycle. And then the sun came out. It triggered the release of adrenaline and cortisol to help get us going so we could circulate the blood, increase heart rate, elevate blood pressure. That circulates our blood to our brains, our bodies, so we can start to think and function. And then we go about our day. And cortisol gradually declines as you go through your day, so it's at your lowest level before you go to sleep. That's how it's supposed to look. If that's not your life, there's a good chance it's not looking like that, right? So if I'm letting my triggers send me into fight or flight, now I'm releasing cortisol when I shouldn't be. If I'm not properly nourishing, either getting in spikes and crashes of blood sugar, or hardly eating anything all day long, and then I go home and I eat a whole bunch of food, Digestion is a really difficult process on the body. It's hard to get into deep, restful sleep when my body's working hard to break down food. And if some of that food, maybe it was dinner, maybe it's our nighttime snack, is some version of sugar, well, now I'm completely throwing off my blood sugar regulating hormones, insulin and glucagon. As I process and metabolize that glucose, I'm also releasing cortisol. One of the functions of cortisol is to keep you alert. So, you know, your nutrition, what you eat, when you eat, how much you eat, absolutely impacts your sleep. Caffeine intake, right? Any stimulant, caffeine, nicotine, taurine and guarana extract, which are often found in energy drinks or diet foods. There might be some medications that are stimulants. A stimulant stimulates you by releasing cortisol. Technology, right? If we're on a screen, not only am I not able to produce melatonin because I don't have darkness, but that blue light is incredibly disruptive to our brain. It takes about 90 minutes for your brain to shut it off before or after you shut the technology off. So a winding down routine, as well as all of the daily habits, are going to impact our ability to sleep. If for whatever reason you've gotten the sleepy signal and you ignore it, or you intentionally override it, your body thinks you must be the night watch. It must be your job to stay awake. Why else are you not going to bed in the darkness? Well, if it's your job to stay awake, then I will help you, and I'll release some cortisol so you stay alert, right? So you really do want to look to see, what are my daily habits and how are they either helping or preventing me from getting a good night's sleep? And then of course we want to go about modifying. But truly incredibly important for your brain as an organ, as well as for our mental and our emotional well-being. We start to get sleep anxiety if I have a really hard time sleeping. We might get depressed. We might, start to fear going to sleep. All of that kicks out cortisol as well. So clearly this is incredibly important. And as a very sleep-deprived nation, I really think we need to get our act together around this and decide that doing the best we can to put practices in place to help set us up for quality sleep is really, really critical. Because none of this happens in a vacuum, right? My sleep impacts my mood impacts how I communicate with people, my mood might impact what I choose to do or not do, what I choose to eat or not eat. I mean, it impacts everything, right? So, and all of these can definitely filter into other areas. So if this is an issue for you, I definitely encourage you to think about some of the things you might be doing that are preventing you from getting that quality sleep. Alrighty, so the final piece of the puzzle here on how to nourish your noggin is social interactions. Even more challenging today than perhaps it was a few months ago. But I think even prior to our coronavirus situation, we were having a significant issue with this anyway. We're pack animals, right? We were part of a tribe. And that was a community where we had very clearly defined roles. We had purpose. We understood what our expectations were, as well as what the expectations of others were for us. If we were unable to fulfill our role, somebody stepped in to support it until we could. We had relatively positive interactions with other members of our tribe. And if there was negativity, it was usually from an external source, which bonded us even more tightly so that we could defend against this external threat. Many people don't have anything of what I just described. We don't have community. We don't have a sense of purpose. We don't feel valued. We maybe think the expectations somebody has placed upon us are unrealistic or don't agree with them. Maybe we have unrealistic expectations for ourselves. Perhaps we don't feel like we have support. And maybe we have a lot of negativity coming in. Maybe we have a lot of negativity internally, maybe both. So, working really hard on having high quality interactions with other humans, it actually does take work these days, right? I mean, in some regards, technology's been great. It's allowed us to connect in ways we never could have connected before. But the extreme of that is it's taken the place of connecting with people that we would normally be connecting with. So we have to find that balance. Every individual needs to figure out what is that balance for themselves. And sometimes this means really working hard to foster and nurture actual connections. Maybe it means working hard to minimize the negativity coming into my life. Perhaps this means I need to set some boundaries with someone or something. Maybe this means I need to disconnect from a particular interaction, relationship. These are all hard things to do, which is why we tend to not do them, right? Why would I make a hard choice? I'll worry about it later, except hard now or harder later is usually the way it goes. Sometimes we have to work hard to just make connections, right? Especially if maybe you're an introvert and you think, oh, I'm fine being by myself. That's probably true, but you're still a human. And so you actually do still need high quality interactions with other humans. And especially in this time where we're a little more isolated or a lot more isolated than we usually are, perhaps some of your natural interactions have been put on pause for a while. Well, that means I have to work hard to fill that void with something positive, right? Often we either don't fill the void, so something fills it in for us, or we fill the void with maybe an unhealthy behavior. So this is where these deliberate and intentional choices really do come into play. We know that social isolation is really a big factor in loneliness, depression, anxiety, not only in older populations, that there's been tons of research on that for people in nursing homes and people who've lost friends and family because they're older, but everybody. And we're starting to see a lot of those stories come out with our current situation going on. Some people have a higher tendency towards this, so they have to probably work harder to pad their environment for success. Some people maybe don't have a higher tendency towards depression or anxiety or loneliness, so maybe they can get away with a little more isolation and be relatively unaffected. This is why everybody is very different, which is why everybody needs to, first of all, understand themselves and then decide to do the hard work in whatever area you know would really enhance or improve your well-being. But padding your environment for success goes both ways. So yes, I want to reach out and have healthy interactions, but that also might mean I need to minimize the negativity that's coming my way. Sometimes we can't help it, right? We're just there and it comes. A lot of times we can. If I know that certain things get me irritated, angry, negative, whatever, and I am voluntarily exposing myself to that, I might want to rethink that, right? So maybe something to ask yourself is this interaction, whether it's with a human or maybe it's with some version of technology, is it helpful? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If it's not one of those three things, then I would encourage you to probably eliminate it, or at the very least, put a boundary around it, right? Because it can be very easy to get down into the pit of negativity pretty quickly. And I just don't think that's helpful from an emotional standpoint, from a mental well-being standpoint, but also from a physiological standpoint, because negativity is tied to fight or flight. So that releases cortisol. So really be thoughtful about the social interactions and the people you interact and engage with. Not to say that we can never be exposed to things that we question or don't agree with. I mean, I think that's part of a healthy interaction. I don't want to just be in an echo chamber and just in a bubble of everyone who thinks just like I do. I don't think that's healthy. I think we should be open to seeing other points of view, maybe understanding other people's perspectives, but be curious about it rather than judgmental about it. This is something I've been working hard with myself on. Rather than judge someone for what they are saying or not saying or not doing, I instead have decided to just step back and be curious and wonder and question. And if I have the opportunity to actually talk about it, I generally will take that on. Not because I want to debate it or argue my point, or because I want them to convince me, or vice versa. I just want to gain a little bit of understanding. That's it. And I think when we can appreciate that we all come from different perspectives, it doesn't necessarily mean one is right, one is wrong, one is better, one's not. Maybe they're just different. Maybe one is better. Who knows, right? But I think if we can just appreciate differences, that will really help our community, our feeling of community, our feeling of belonging, instead of this great divide that so many people feel, right? And that is often because we are very quick to judge. We judge without knowing all the facts. We judge without knowing the entire story. We judge based on our own experiences or based on our own exposure or lack of exposure to things. So that's something to think about too, is social interactions, that expanding your knowledge base and diversifying the people you interact with is probably a really great opportunity for growing. Again, you can decide what you're going to believe or think. It doesn't mean that having this conversation is necessarily to convince one or the other. It's just to open me up to a different point of view. And I think personally that is very healthy. All righty, so I have given you lots of ways to nourish your noggin. I'm going to guess, because I know most of you, you're already doing a whole bunch of this. So what I would say is, if you found something that sort of triggered a response in you, like, oh, I should do that, or I didn't know that, or yeah, I could improve on that. Track your behavior. Maybe you do a whole week of tracking in every category. Maybe you pick the one or two that really, yeah, if I did different in this, it would help me. But just track behavior for 1 week. And at the end of the week, just assess, what am I doing that is helping me be a healthy, happy, high-functioning human? And what are some things that are maybe preventing from me being that healthy, happy, high-functioning human? And when you identify the things that are preventing you from doing that, then the next step is to determine, am I willing to do something about this, right? Am I willing? Am I ready? First, am I able? The answer is probably yes. You probably are able. You just may or may not be willing. Maybe you're not able. That could be the case, but for the most part, most people can do something about behaviors. It's just a matter of whether you're willing to do it or not. Hopefully you find some things that you're willing to modify, and then of course you actually have to do it, right? Nothing changes if we don't do things differently. All right, so here's your final thought. What does it take to have a healthy head, to nourish your noggin? It takes a whole bunch of stuff, right? In case you didn't figure it out, it's called the healthy lifestyle. I know that is not very sexy, which is why I didn't just come out right in the front and say, oh, just have a healthy lifestyle, because that would have made this about a 30-second conversation. But that really is what it is, right? You got to give your body and your brain what it needs. It needs high quality fuel. It needs a variety of that high quality fuel. It needs minimal exposure to poison. It needs minimal exposure to fight or flight. It needs movement. It needs rest, repair, recovery, renewal. It needs things that bring us joy. It needs interactions with other humans. I mean, that is what it needs. So hopefully you found one or two things that you can work on so that we can all continue to be healthy, happy humans. And maybe the next time I get to see you in person, we can chat about some of the things that you've implemented because of the thoughts here today. So that is all. I hope this gave you some things to think about and some things to do. And until next time, I hope you will go and be a better being. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.